Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow? Occupy our homes.
We are the 99%. We are the 99%.
The protest against predatory lending and indifferent government, and what the hell, also against deadbeat dad congressmen like Joe Walsh.
Not a great time right now for the congressman. He's tied up for a little bit. It would be better probably in the afternoon, or you can talk to me. What would work better for you guys?
Well, we'd like to speak with him. So
all right. Do you want to try to swing by in the afternoon?
I think we'll stay.
An Occupy victory. New York's governor reverses on taxing the rich to give a tax break to the middle class. Occupy Atlanta. Here's a hero. The Reverend Joseph Lowery addresses them. Joins us. Occupy the president's Kansas speech.
I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot. When everyone does their fair share. When everyone plays by the same rules. These aren't democratic values or Republican values. These aren't 1% values or 99% values. They're American values, and we have to reclaim them.
Obama at Osawatomie. Osawatomie, Wasamattayu. New polls, Gingrich up by 15 on Romney at 37%, highest in the GOP this year. Thus, a hint at a dark horse candidate. Seriously, any idea what Rick Santorum meant when he said, let's look at what's going to be taught in our schools because now we have same-sex couples being the same and their sexual activity being seen as equal and being affirmed by society as heterosexual couples and their activity? We'll ask Patton Oswalt and Michelle Bachmann. Meet Elijah. That's Michelle Bachmann, owned by an 8-year-old kid and then staring daggers at him. All that and more now on Countdown. Good evening from New York. This is Tuesday, December 6, 336 days until the 2012 presidential election. Occupy Wall Street becoming Occupy Our Homes for a day, spearheading a national movement to protest predatory lending, to stop bank auctions and evictions, and reclaim foreclosed homes. The fifth story on the countdown, Occupy occupying congressional offices on Capitol Hill as well, taking to the streets of more than 24 cities for a national day of action, and taking up nearly all the presidential speech in Kansas. The president coming up. First, Occupy protesters joining forces with Back to the Land and other groups fighting foreclosures in Oakland, Chicago, Bloomington, Indiana, Minneapolis, Denver, and more. Staging a foreclosure tour of Brooklyn's battered East New York neighborhood, claiming an abandoned building there for a homeless family to use. Rallying on courthouse steps in Atlanta, trying to disrupt an auction of foreclosed homes inside, and hearing this call for fairness from veteran civil rights leader, the Reverend Joseph Lowery, our guest on this news hour in a moment.
We are calling upon the banking community to take their turn at bat now and help people who need help.
In case the nation's banks still haven't gotten the message, they might keep in mind that today's protests are just a start. Max Ramu, an organizer with the group Take Back the Land, saying this is an important practice round for our spring 2012 spring offensive. The early winter offensive launched on Capitol Hill today. Groups of Occupy protesters pushing President Obama's jobs plan, making themselves comfortable in Republican deadbeat dad Congressman Joe Walsh's office. Others targeting more prominent Republicans, including House Majority Leader Cantor and House Budget Chairman Ryan, who was not on hand to hear a mother of two, one a special needs child, explain why they were there.
We have no medical insurance. We need family-sustaining jobs, not minimum wage with no benefits.
And there will be no surprise raids on the Occupy D.C. camp at McPherson Square. Federal judge ruling the National Park Service must give protesters 24 hours notice before trying to evict them for camping and sleeping on the square. In New York, Congressman Gerald Nadler asking U.S. Attorney General Holder to investigate allegations of excessive force by New York City police against Occupy protesters. Nadler citing the September 24th pepper spray attack on 4 women that helped put Occupy on the map, plus the mass arrests of protesters October 1st on Brooklyn Bridge, including many who believe they were obeying police orders that led to their arrests, and the mass eviction of protesters from the original Occupy camp at Zuccotti Park, and the, quote, targeting of journalists for mistreatment during Occupy protests during and after the eviction. One more Occupy note. A federal judge allowing Occupy New Orleans protesters to reoccupy their camp for at least a week after police closed it before dawn. There was just one arrest made during that raid in New Orleans, a protester who reportedly wanted to be arrested. Occupy Atlanta protesters tried to disrupt foreclosure auctions in 3 county courthouses today. Among those taking part, Reverend Joseph Lowery, civil rights leader who helped lead the Montgomery bus boycott and marched many times with Dr. Martin Luther King. It's an honor to have you on the program, sir. Thanks for your time tonight.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
How did you come to be involved in the Occupy protests?
Well, like the rest of the country, I was caught up in the spirit of this spontaneous people's grassroots movement several weeks ago when they talked about the 99 and the 1%, when they talked about the disparities in this country, and they talked about the unfair tax system in this country, when they talked about the foreclosures against people's homes, the evictions that are taking place, the one-sided marketplace where the few, there's something wrong with a system where a handful of people have more than they'll ever need, while the masses of people have less than they always need. And this Occupy group has caught the conscience. They've stung the conscience of the nation, and they got my attention. And so we wanted to give our support to a group of ministers. We're giving our support to them, particularly in the area of mortgage foreclosure.
Mm-hmm. The Occupy Our Homes event today in Atlanta particularly, what's the foreclosure crisis like in the Atlanta area? What's been done so far to try to stop it so people can stay in their homes?
It's one of the highest in the country in Georgia. Georgia is one of the highest number of evictions and foreclosures in the country. And we want to put a stop to it. We remember when the critical nature of our economy was exposed to the world, the banks were in trouble. And the nation came to the rescue of the banks. All of our money, our tax monies, were used to help these banks save face and save their existence. And now we're asking the banks to help those who are facing foreclosure of their homes. Its turnabout is fair play. It's the banks' turn to be at the bat, and we're asking them to launch a 6-month to 9-month moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. So there'll be no evictions and foreclosures for 9 months, and that will give us an opportunity to make the modifications and adjustments that need to be made to the loans to put them where people can afford them.
They have not necessarily shown the banking industry much in the way of conscience. Do you expect to hear something positive from them based on your call?
Well, we hope that we will. We're prepared to respond if they don't. We're not going to support banks that don't support the moratorium. If we have to take our money out of those banks that don't show sensitivity to the least of these, then we're prepared to do that. We believe the banks ought to do at least what was done for them in the bailouts.
Everybody in protests of all kinds in the last 50 years have thrown Dr. King's name out with alarming ease. But you're a man who knows this. Are these protests, the Occupy movement's goals, are they in line with what Martin Luther King was trying to achieve?
Well, many of their goals are. Some of their goals have not been made clear yet. Remember, this is a grassroots, spontaneous movement, not by any organized group, but by the people themselves who feel frustrated, who feel neglected, who feel hurt, who feel isolated from the mainstream of our economic existence. And they haven't developed yet, as far as I know, a long range and a short range and a mid-range program that's well defined. But they do know that there's something wrong in the country when 99% of the people own less than 1% of the people, that the tax code and everything else all are directed to favor that 1%. And that has to come to an end in this country.
And as we know, nothing has ever changed for the good without somebody first standing up and saying this is wrong and it needs to change.
Exactly. And I think this group, Occupy group, has struck the conscience of the nation. And while they may not be as polished and refined as we wanted to be, let's not overlook the fact that they've embraced truth. And there's something wrong with the system where 99% of the people own only 1%, own less than the 1% of the people own in this country.
One of our great civil rights leaders, Reverend Joseph Lowery, protesting today with Occupy Atlanta on behalf of families facing foreclosure or already pushed out of the foreclosed homes. Great thanks for all of your work, sir, today and in all the years past. And for your time
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Back in New York, Occupy Wall Street's message of fairness for the 99% seems to have actually had an impact. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo announcing today that he and legislative leaders had agreed on a new state income tax plan, raising taxes on top earners. But for the 99%,
I propose a tax cut aimed at the middle class that I believe will help stimulate the economy by putting much needed money back in the hands of millions of people across this state. It will be the lowest tax rate in 58 years.
Governor Cuomo had previously insisted on letting a tax surcharge on millionaires expire at year's end. The new plan passes. Top earners will pay over 8% compared to just under 7% now. For more on the governor's tax reversal and today's Occupy March in Brooklyn, I'm joined by Ydanis Rodriguez, the New York City councilman and Occupy Wall Street supporter. Councilman, good to talk to you again.
Thank you, sir.
The Cuomo plan, is it good news for the 99%? Is it an indication that while maybe Mayor Bloomberg doesn't get Occupy, Governor Cuomo does?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Occupy movement for playing an important role on persuading Mario Cuomo on the importance of getting a fair share, especially to the millionaire. We believe that by his initiative, we are making important progress. This will not bring a whole solution to getting the revenue that we need to balance the budget for the next year, but this is a good beginning on getting the revenue that we need so that we don't need to cut on the working class and the middle class.
You took part in the Occupy Our Homes March in Brooklyn today. Obviously, you must have heard our interview with Reverend Lowery about what's going on in Atlanta. How bad is the foreclosure crisis in New York, and are there prospects that the banks and the NYPD would actually allow families who need homes to move into these abandoned, wasted, empty properties?
Well, first of all, I have a great opportunity to walk with more than 500 New Yorkers from the Occupy movement around different blocks in East New York, Brooklyn, and we went through 4 different house owners that they had lost their houses, and we ended in one of the houses that the home owner decided to stay in the house, and the Occupy movement will stay there supporting that home owner so that he will be able to keep the house. We believe that addressing the issue of supporting homeowners that they have lost their houses is an important initiative of the Occupy movement, city, state, and nationwide, because this is an issue that has been affecting people throughout the nation. There's a clear reality. The governor has bailed out the bank, and we have been sell out. And that has been said throughout the protests, and we believe that by continuing the Occupy movement around the issue of the people that they have lost their houses, their homes, I believe is a good initiative, and I think that it will help us to continue the movement in this city and the state and the nation.
In terms of the movement continuing, after Zuccotti Park was closed, there was much speculation that Occupy would not either continue to grow or it would decline. Obviously, it's been forced to branch out. Was the closing of the park in some way a gift to Occupy to sort of direct it out into the community and refocus where it was going to be in terms of its presence?
I believe it will. As someone that represents Northern Manhattan, one of the areas that the average income is $25,000 a year, I believe that it is important to bring the Occupy movement to our own communities. And that's what happened today in East New York, Brooklyn. It is walking through the working class neighborhood that we have a lot of support from residents in that area. And now our challenge is to continue organizing to bring the Occupy movement to the South Bronx, to Brooklyn, to El Barrio, to Harlem, to areas that have been affected basically because we are the 99%, we are the working class, we are the middle class. And I think that Mayor Bloomberg, he should know. He can evict the people from the park, but he cannot evict the movement. This mayor, he doesn't get it. He's not connected to New Yorkers, and he thought that by evicting people from the park, the movement will be silenced. No one will silence this movement unless we take a specific initiative on closing the gap between the 1% and the 99%.
New York City Council member Ydanis Rodriguez, once again, great thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thanks to you, sir.
For the first time today, the President of the United States sounded like he could have been reading a speech designed to go over well at an Occupy protest, but he framed it as something evocative of what Teddy Roosevelt had said in the same Kansas town in 1910. Politics and Occupy, next on Countdown. The speech references the 99%, class warfare, income inequality, and selling out our democracy to the highest bidder. Made by Michael Moore, by me, speaker at Occupy Wall Street, President of the United States today in Kansas. New polling giving him the highest score of any Republican in the presidential cycle, 37% approval, 15 points higher than Romney. But the day after we all saw him smooch Donald Trump's hiney, an old quote about Trump comes back to bite his hiney. Newt, breakfast at Tiffany's Gingrich in Worst Persons. And how could you screw up the kissing the baby part of being a politician? Maybe you see what the 8-year-old kid did to Michelle Bachmann. Proof today that the message of Occupy has finally been heard loud and clear, not just around the country, but inside the White House. In our fourth story in the countdown, the president gives a glimpse into his 2012 campaign strategy in a speech full of Occupy themes, pledging to fight against inequality at what he called a make-or-break moment for the middle class.
I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot, when everyone does their fair share, when everyone plays by the same rules. These aren't Democratic values or Republican values. These aren't 1% values or 99% values. They're American values, and we have to reclaim them.
President Obama spoke in the same small Kansas town in which Teddy Roosevelt delivered his pivotal New Nationalism speech more than 100 years ago. It was there that Roosevelt, a year and a half after he left the presidency, detailed the need for economic fairness and equal opportunity for all. Today, President Obama put forth similar populist themes, drawing on language you might recognize from the Occupy movement.
In the last few decades, the average income of the top 1% has gone up by more than 250%. to $1.2 million per year. I'm not talking about millionaires, people who have $1 million. I'm saying people who make $1 million every single year. For the top 100th of 1%, the average income is now $27 million per year. The typical CEO who used to earn about 30 times more than his or her worker now earns 110 times more. And yet, over the last decade, the incomes of most Americans have actually fallen by about 6%. Now, this kind of inequality, a level that we haven't seen since the Great Depression, hurts us all.
The impact and necessity of Occupy was also evident during the entirety of the president's 56-minute speech.
Inequality also distorts our democracy. It gives an outsized voice to the few who can afford high-priced lobbyists and unlimited campaign contributions. And it runs the risk of selling out our democracy to the highest bidder. It leaves everyone else rightly suspicious that the system in Washington is rigged against them, that our elected representatives aren't looking out for the interests of most Americans.
Joining me now, Robert Reich, the Labor Secretary during the Clinton administration, professor at Berkeley and author of Aftershock, The Next Economy and America's Future. Thanks once again for your time tonight, sir.
Good evening, Keith.
Given how reluctant all politicians have been to embrace the language and the spirit of Occupy, never mind the name or any of the titles of the cities around the country in which there is an Occupy, how far did the president really go today, and how surprising a speech was that?
I think this is an extraordinary speech, Keith. I think this, in a sense, is the most significant and important economic speech the president has given because he's laid it all out. He's connected the dots. He showed how inequality has affected our economy because the middle class no longer has the purchasing power to keep the economy going, and also how inequality has undermined our democracy because so much wealth and influence and privilege are at the top that they basically can flood our legislators and our Senate and Congress with money. The president really did provide Americans, I hope, with a peek at what the 2012 election will be all about.
So what does it mean before the 2012 election? Was there anything in there that hinted that there'd be action behind some of these words?
Well, the president did say that he was going to go after a lot of people on Wall Street who had been getting away with not being accountable. The president did say to Wall Street it has to modify mortgages and do things for average middle-class people with regard to home and mortgage mitigation. The president also suggested that he was going to really demand or in some way encourage corporate executives to be more socially responsible and stop creating jobs abroad instead of jobs in the United States. Now, again, there wasn't legislation attached to that last piece, but the president was fired up and said things that I have not heard him say in a way I have not heard him say so far in this presidency. I kept on, as he was talking, I kept on saying, finally, where has this president been? This is the Barack Obama we elected. Is there any indication in that he's going, or even based on the early reaction to it, that there's going to be more of this from the president? And if from him, or even if not from him, could we see other elected officials now given entree into the area and essentially permission to echo some of these points made by Occupy, whether Occupy gets credit or not? I think so, Keith. The president has a bully pulpit, and that is that bully pulpit, that term was invented during Teddy Roosevelt's reign here in the United States, and that means the president has, like Teddy Roosevelt, an extraordinary power to convey a message when he wants to convey it, and he gives cover for every other politician who wants to use the same message, but may have been a little bit nervous about doing it for fear of appearing to be a little bit radical or to make one group a little bit upset with him or her. But no, the president, by using Teddy Roosevelt's bully pulpit, and it was not insignificant that this was done at the site of Teddy Roosevelt's new nationalism speech, where Roosevelt said, look, American corporations, you've got to start working for America. Americans, you have got to start demanding that our economy work for all of you, and I'm going to make sure it does. It wasn't an accident that Obama chose this spot and also chose Teddy Roosevelt as a mentor. I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah, and it was Teddy Roosevelt, in fact, who popularized that phrase, bully pulpit, as the first president to view it in those terms. So that's what it does for the president, conceivably what it does for policy. What does this speech do for the Occupy movement?
Well, it certainly bolsters the credibility of what a lot of people in the Occupy movement who have been supporting the Occupy movement have been saying. Inequality, wildly grotesque inequality, is one of the largest economic problems we face, if not the key economic problem, because it lies behind our economic, the rest of our economic problems. It means we don't have enough aggregate demand because consumers are not getting enough money in their pockets, and that means a loss of jobs, and it's also undermining democracy. He also said that it was undermining opportunity, that it was slowing down social mobility, that a child born today has much less opportunity to get ahead than a child born 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. He emphasized CEO pay and the grotesque dimensions of the pay on Wall Street. This is a president that is echoing Occupy, not only Occupy movement, but also a lot of what Americans have been saying. When the president talks about the game being rigged, A lot of people, I'm sure, whether they're occupiers or not, see that speech, hear that speech, or read that speech and say, yes, that's exactly what I feel. And Mr. President, tell me exactly, or at least over the 2012 election season, tell me exactly what you're going to do about it. Are we going to see a second Obama term that really is different than the first Obama term? Is this going to be an Obama second term that doesn't play into the hands of Wall Street, that makes demands on corporate America and demands on Wall Street that the economy work for average working people? Maybe.
I like that word rigged, too, for what it is or is not worth. The former Labor Secretary, Aftershock author, Robert Reich, thanks yet again for some of your time tonight. Okay, take care. Speaking of history and Osawatomie and all of that, there's another element of the history. Sometimes it comes back and bites you, as Newt Gingrich found out today when his insulting comments about Donald Trump were unearthed a day after he said all those nice things about Donald Trump. Coming up.
1-888-329-6344. That's 1-888-329-6344.
No Republican presidential wannabe has scored as high as the 37% support Newt Gingrich has just gotten in a new poll. On the other hand, with every new poll, there does seem to be one less Republican for him to compete with. Ahead. First, the sanity break, and time marches on. We begin with the TMO, adorable clip of the day. Nothing on a cold winter night like lying down by the fire, but first you have to learn how to lie down. Pepper here does not seem to be picking it up too quickly. I'm not tired. I just want that doggy treat. Eventually, he sort of accidentally lies down, which is good enough for today's lesson. Tomorrow, he learns how to sit on the couch with the remote in one paw and the other paw in a big bag of Cheetos. I didn't say sit indefinitely. To the world of romance, everybody's favorite part of the wedding, the tossing of the bouquet. There's always somebody who takes it a bit too seriously. Here's the pitch, and wipe out. Traditionally, catching the bouquet means you're going to get married. Maybe she'll meet a handsome doctor in the ER. Finally, we end as we always do with a plank walking competition. It's Key West's National Walk the Plank Championship, where pirate reenactors demonstrate their plank walking skills. R, Jim Boy, R. Competitors are judged on silly costumes, humor of plea, and how big a splash they make when they fall. Same rules as judging the GOP debates. The winner, a man from Baltimore who walked the plank dressed as Santa Claus, release rotation, splash. The real Santa Claus couldn't be reached for comment. A spokesman explained it's a very busy time of the year. Time marches on. 2012 roundup and the Gingrich surge, along with the planted hint that he may now be challenged by the dark horse we've all been waiting for, Senator Jim DeMint. Dumont's Dark of Night Theater will not be seen tonight, so we could instead bring you Countdown, the longest continuously running 8 p.m. news hour on cable, unless you consider Fox News. We're live each night at 8 Eastern, more or less. We call it Our Little Miracle. Newt breakfast at Tiffany's Gingrich, now leading the Republican field by a huge margin. New poll numbers showing him with more support than any other candidate has had at any point this year. Then again, he is matching up against 4 former frontrunners now consigned to the dustbin of history. In our third story tonight, one of them, Mitt Romney, responds by turning his attacks from the president to the Newt. But even as they battle for the top spot, the Republican establishment still fantasizing about all the other candidates they'd rather see there. According to a Gallup poll out today, Newt Gingrich now leading the pack with 37% and everybody else just about watching. Romney staying at his permanent 22%. Not only is 37 the highest number any candidate has seen this year, but perhaps even more shockingly, it comes in the same lifetime in which Gingrich was polling among the lowest, 4% in August. Gingrich also leading in key individual states, exactly 4 weeks to the Iowa caucuses. Gingrich leading the field there with 33%. Romney and Ron Paul tied for second at 18%. In South Carolina, which will hold its primary on the 21st of next month, Gingrich is 38%. This, even though the Gingrich campaign still has limited presence in those states, in part because of its massive debt from spending on luxury jets, among other items, early in his campaign. The Washington Post reporting today that Gingrich has just begun paying off nearly $1.2 million in bills after having spent nearly $3 for every $2 he raised. Gingrich aides saying they're now seeing a rush of fundraising dollars, however, as he surges in these polls. Romney, meantime, not expected to get much of a boost from this endorsement today by the noted GOP veteran Dan Quayle.
My friends, Washington is a mess, and we need to send Mitt Romney to Washington to fix the mess out there.
Romney now going on the attack, the former governor calling Newt Gingrich the consummate government insider.
And if the American people believe that what we need is someone who spent the last 40 years or so in Washington, D.C., working as an insider, why, he's the right guy.
Romney also announcing he's still not quite desperate enough to participate in that Donald Trump debate.
As to this Donald Trump hosted debate, yes or no on that?
No, I'm not participating in that. We have 2 debates in December that I've agreed to participate in. The rest of the month is going to be spent campaigning.
Well, he might be spurning that particular member of the 1%. Romney does have the support of more billionaires than any other candidate, 42 of them having now donated to his campaign. Still, the Republican establishment is not yet sold on him, the conservative blogger Eric Erickson revealing, or perhaps planting, that even with the primaries just around the corner, the GOP is still thinking about other possible presidential candidates, tweeting, some GOPers are starting to float Jim DeMint's name as a wild card dark horse candidate. I'd take him. And even this one. Other name being tried out, Jeb Bush. Joining me now, Countdown contributor Nia-Malika Henderson, national political reporter of The Washington Post. Nia, good evening.
Hey, good to see you.
No matter who the front runner has been, the Republicans have always been looking for another one. Is the dement thing serious? Is Jeb Bush serious? Didn't Jeb Bush promise his mother he wasn't going to run?
You know, I got to say, I ran into Jim DeMint about a month ago in one of the green rooms in Washington. Didn't seem like a man who was thinking about running for president. Didn't even seem like a man who was thinking of endorsing one of these candidates. Much more concerned with getting the Senate back into the Republican column. But again, I think this is what we've seen for a long time, this desire for some sort of fantasy candidate to come in here riding in on a white horse and rescue the Republican Party from itself and from these candidates that just have not caught on with Tea Party voters, with the far right wing of the party. You see Mitt Romney there stuck at 20%. Newt Gingrich on fire with this 39% approval rating and percentage. You know, but I think people are just waiting to see him, quite frankly, implode. I'll be down in South Carolina with him on Thursday. That's a state that'll probably be in his column come the primary. And of course, we know that that state for the last 20 years, 30 years, in fact, has always picked the winner of the GOP nominating contest. And he looks really strong down there. One note about dark horses. I'm not saying it's the same era as the 1940 campaign, but at this point, if I remember correctly, at this point in 1939, the 1940 Republican nominee, Wendell Willkie, wasn't even a Republican yet. And it's almost the same way for Eisenhower in 1952. They will pull people out of a hat if necessary. And that kind of dovetails with my next question, which is, to what degree is that 37% number in the Gallup for Gingrich a function of the discarded bodies of Herman Cain and Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann, and to some degree this, you know, I'm stuck at 20% Romney? Yeah, it's a complete function of that. Of course, we saw the boom and bust cycle of all of these guys. Rick Perry, Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain drop out. So a lot of that is finally shifting over to Newt Gingrich. They think this is the guy to be the anti-Romney, the non-Romney candidate who can coalesce, that people will coalesce around. And I've got to say, I'm sure that at this point, Mitt Romney is worried. He's unveiling something of an attack strategy in terms of Newt Gingrich, calling him a career politician. Don't know how effective that will be, given the fact that Mitt Romney, I mean, I think he's been running for president for the last 5 or 6 years. I don't think he has a job at this point, unless you count running for president as a full-time job. So I don't know how effective that will be. We'll see tomorrow. Chris Christie out in Iowa. I think in some ways, Chris Christie is sort of the alter ego of Mitt Romney. He's going to be able to channel some of that regular guy populism that Mitt Romney in some ways seems just unable to do. So I think that's going to be an important thing to watch tomorrow, to see if Chris Christie goes at Newt Gingrich in the way that he's been able to go at the president. Two things, boom or bust on the presidential cycle. That's perfect. If you haven't used that a lot in print, you should use it every time. Secondly, as to Romney and sort of perpetually being in the race, if you inherited your presidential campaign posters, you have been running for a long time, as Mr. Romney has. But now, last question about Gingrich. So far, his past, which is as checkered as anybody else's in the Republican field, including everybody before we knew about the Herman Cain stories and all the other ones, the Rick Perry somnambulance, it has not seemed to have been as problematic for him as Romney's past was for him, or again Cain or Perry. Is that again just a function of the fact that he has not been first in line, and it's been such easy, low-hanging fruit that nobody's bothered to reach in the back to some of the lesser candidates? Yeah, I mean, it's very surprising to me that it hasn't really doomed him yet. It's almost like Newt Gingrich is this figure that everybody knows. Everybody knows that he's had this messy past in terms of his ethics violations when he was at the House. Everybody pretty much knows that he was kicked out of the House, and everybody knows that he's been married for 3 times. But they do recognize him as a figure who they think is very smart, who they want to see on the stage next to Barack Obama. This is a guy who's challenging Barack Obama to, I think, 7 Lincoln Douglas-style debates, 3 hours. Who's going to watch that? But this is, you know, they like that. They like his bombast, and so I think in some ways they're willing to forgive some of what have frankly been his flip-flops. He was interviewed by Glenn Beck today. We're talking about they were talking about his past position on health care. He essentially said that he backs a health care mandate, a variation of it. But I think in some ways they're just used to it. They think he's a better messenger than Mitt Romney is. And I think in some ways, even though you haven't seen a lot of the Republicans, the rank-and-file Republicans, back him, that in some ways works to his favor because it allows him to make the argument that in some ways he is an anti-establishment figure. Go figure, here's a guy who spent 20 years in the House, but so far it's working for him.
The Washington Post, Nia-Malika Henderson, Countdown contributor. Always a pleasure, Nia. Thank you.
Thank you.
The fire starts. The fire department races to the scene. The fire department watches attentively as the home burns to the ground. The fire department then goes home. Worst person's next. Michelle Bachmann gets fricasseed over gay equality by Elijah. Elijah is 8 years old. It's on tape. First the worst, and let's meet the latest victim of the governor of Wisconsin. She's voted in every election since 1948, but fortunately Scott Walker and the Koch brothers are going to make damn sure she doesn't commit voter fraud next year. Michelle Bachmann is defeated in a debate by an 8-year-old boy. Coming up. First, because these next folks can only dream of lasting long enough to even compete with the 8-year-olds of this world. Here, Countdown's top 3 nominees for today's worst persons in the world. The bronze to Mayor David Crocker of South Fulton, Tennessee. He's the man in charge in Obion County, where they have pay for spray, which is if you do not subscribe to the services of the fire department will not put out the fire at your house. It has happened for at least the 2nd time in a year, this time to a woman named Vicki Bell. It is, of course, beyond all human comprehension that you could run a community safety element this way, not even a pay afterwards or an a la carte exception for a house while it's actually on fire. But the most maddening thing is the fire department, as it always does, went to the Bell home, and as it burned down, they stayed there and watched. The logic behind that being that they have to do that to make sure the fire doesn't spread to the property of any of the subscribers. The state of Tennessee permits this, makes its statewide government and everybody in the state look like cretins and pyromaniacs. The runner-up, Republican frontrunner Newt Gingrich, as our friend Dave Weigel reported, while we were all watching Newt the Chameleon kissing Donald Trump's shiny metal ass yesterday, an operative at a rival campaign sent out an old interview with Gingrich conducted in 1989 with the Ripon Society. Quoting Gingrich, 1989, "Quotas send exactly the wrong signal to poor people. It says that they're going to get justice through political action and that justice is going to redress the past. That is simply historically not true. It's not the way the world works. The more power there is in a political system, the more the powerful exploit it. New York hasn't ended up a dream world for the poor. It has become a place where Donald Trump manipulates the game." Gingrich now calls Trump an American original and lets Trump manipulate him. But our winner, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, we have yet another human face representing all the victims of this bubblehead marionette of the Koch brothers. Please meet Ruthelle Frank of Brokaw, Wisconsin. Ruthelle is 84 years old and she's voted in every election since 1948. Despite the fact that she has been paralyzed on her left side since birth. Ms. Frank went even further than that. She didn't just vote for all these years. She was eventually elected to the Brokaw, Wisconsin Village Board. But right now it looks like she's cast her final vote because she was born at home in 1927, so there's no birth certificate. And so even though Ms. Frank has a certificate of baptism and her social security card, she cannot get one of those new state-issued IDs that was foisted upon Wisconsin by that fascist bastard Scott Walker and the criminal gang put in control of the state by the blood money of the Kochs. The state register of deeds in Wisconsin does have a record of her birth, but her maiden name was misspelled by the doctor in 1927. So to get an actual birth certificate so she can get her Walker-approved identity papers, she has to petition the court to get the mistake made in 1927 corrected in 2011. Total cost could easily exceed $200. to prevent the almost non-existent crime of voting when you're not supposed to, $200 to get an ID for a woman who has voted in every election since 1948. And before you say, well, that's asinine, but it's just the one woman, one study estimates that there are 177,399 residents, 65 and older, who do not have state photo ID in Wisconsin alone. Governor Scott Walker, fascist bastard, today's worst person in the world. Contrary to all major indicators, polls, fundraising endorsements, publicity, Rick Santorum is still running for president. If you thought he would drop out before again embarrassing himself in some major way, you don't know Rick. Our number one story, Mr. Man on Child, Man on Dog is at it again, this time coming out against gay marriage because we would have to teach children, he says, that homosexuals are equal to heterosexuals. In an appearance at Iowa's Dordt College, the Republican would-be was asked to explain his anti-gay marriage stance, and after initially being shocked that the questioner did not agree that gay marriage held dire consequences for families, Mr. Santorum focused on the children. Let's look at what's going to be taught in our schools, because now we have same-sex couples being the same and their sexual activity being seen as equal and being affirmed by society as heterosexual couples in their activity. So what is going to be taught to our people in health class in our schools? What is going to be taught to our children about who in our stories, even to little children, what are married couples? What families look like in America? Won't someone please think of the syntax? Coming from a man who supports abstinence-only education, wouldn't Rick be in favor of no sexual activity being taught? But Santorum isn't the only one having a problem defending an anti-gay rights position. This other case was even more open and shut. At a book signing, Michelle Bachmann thought she was just doing a variation on the kissing the baby thing. Look out, Congresswoman, that 8-year-old, it's loaded.
My mom, Miss Bachmann, my mom is kissing me. I'm kissing.
Oh, look at that look. Let's bring in comedian and the star of the upcoming film, young adult, Patton Oswalt. Good to talk to you, sir.
Oh, hey, thanks, Keith. Thank you.
Got to start with the other young adult, little Elijah there. I know it's not fair to send Michelle Bachmann up against an 8-year-old boy because the 8-year-old boy is going to win 9 times out of 10. But if you're Michelle Bachmann, you got smoked by an 8-year-old who just whispers, it's time to drop out, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm already seeing on Twitter how some people are already saying, oh, well, he was programmed by the mom to say what he said, and so let me just put this out there. What if he was coached by the mom to say that thing to Michelle Bachmann? It's still a completely valid point, and why didn't she answer it instead of rolling her eyes at a little kid who, even if he was fed that line, emotionally is trying to defend his mom. Exactly. I mean, even if he didn't say that, even if he just said, hey, I think you're being mean to my mom and I wish you would stop, why would anyone roll their eyes at a little kid? I mean, if a little kid came up to me and said, I don't like that you support gay marriage, and I think that because it hurts my mom's feelings, even though I don't agree with that kid, I would at least respond to him. Yes. Instead of rolling my eye. Like, that's the creepiest mean girl bully behavior you could possibly do.
Plus, doesn't it imply, like Michelle Bachmann memorizes things all the time and just repeats them without thinking about them. What's wrong with that?
Well, it also implies if she rolled her eyes at this little kid and disregarded him, it also implies that little kids call her on her stuff all the time and she's sick of it. Exactly. Like, she's so used to 5- and 6-year-olds coming up and saying, you know, you totally misquoted that Bible verse. She's like, oh, great, this again. That's right. You know, some kid, a human being who's barely potty trained handing me my ass. Awesome.
Yeah, or she's thinking, boy, I'm just getting killed by these midgets out here.
Yeah,
that's the other possibility.
Right.
Rick Santorum. Do you think he listens to himself as he talks? My favorite question of the year, a variation of it, does he know we can see and hear him?
I think a deeper question for Rick Santorum is, you know, whenever he brings up stuff about, oh, we're teaching these kids about gay sex and gay marriage, and it says in the Bible, he always brings up the Bible as if he's bringing up the Bible as if it's not his fault that he feels the way he feels. It's almost like he's saying, I would love to be tolerant of gays. It's this darn book. Every morning I get up, I'm like, let me get out there and get at those gays and be tolerant. Oh, Jesus. Romans 1:27, you got me again. Like you can't say look, I don't mind you saying evil stuff like that if you then immediately own it. If you immediately say, I said it and that's how I feel. But he says it and then goes, and by the way, it's this book of adventures and fables. It's not me. I'm just doing what this book says.
Yeah, it's like the Bible beats him up like Elijah, the 8-year-old boy, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, look, I'm sorry that this very finely written book is bullying you. Maybe you need to, you know what, Rick? It gets better.
Yeah.
It actually gets better. Nice. You can move on and think.
And where was it, Santorum? Has Santorum gotten off the subject of bestiality finally? Is he done with that, do you suppose?
Yeah, now he's just focusing on the gay sex. And it seems to be, again, it's this classic, it's all, he talks about, it used to be that the big signifiers for if you were gay is, like back in the 70s and 80s, it would be people saying, well, Bruce, he's really into musical theater and he's good with colors. But now, the new signifier to me was, especially someone like Rick, is like, well, I'd love to set Rick up with Donna, but he's really against gay marriage, if you know what I mean. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yep.
He's super pro-family, right?
Yep.
So probably they wouldn't be a good match.
Patton Oswalt, the new film is Young Adult. Great thanks for bearing with us with our studio stuff tonight, and always a pleasure to talk to you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you.
That's countdown for this, the 332nd day since John Boehner and the Republicans took the House, 332 days in which the Republicans haven't passed a jobs bill of any kind. I'm Keith Olbermann. Good night and good luck.